Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Wednesday, January 14th, 2026. I am Dave Biddle, very happy joined by Patrick Murphy. Pat and I are going to get into what we've been hearing about the Buckeyes offseason, defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator. I don't want to scare you guys about defensive coordinator. I'll just cut to the chase there. I'm hearing they're optimistic Matt Patricia is going to stay. It's not a done deal yet. We're going to get into transfer portal stuff, all of that. Patrick, good to see you on a Wednesday.
Good to see you too, Dave.
All right, let's start with Patricia. I was told by a very good source that they're optimistic he's going to stay, but it's not a done deal. Like, does that kind of jibe with what you're hearing?
Yeah, I think the NFL cycle is going to play out, and they think that he will remain through there. Whether that is because other teams NFL teams decide to look elsewhere, or Ohio State believes it's the best place for Matt Patricia, or a combination of the two and some other factors, including his enjoyment of Columbus and his family enjoying being around Ohio State, which I know from talking to him throughout the year, his family was really enjoying, kind of everything that goes along with Ohio State and college football. I think that all kind of goes together. If an NFL team came with a really good offer and a situation that made a lot of sense, because look, Matt Patricia doesn't need a ton of money. He's made plenty of money throughout his career. Obviously, money is a factor in all of these conversations, just like it is with probably everything we'll talk about today. But, I think he wants a situation where he knows it's going to be right. If he's going to leave Ohio State, where he just put together one of the top defenses in the modern era of college football, I think if the NFL situation, it's not going to be one where he wants to entirely rebuild a defense, right? That he'd rather have something to build on at the very least. So I think that Ohio State is well positioned. And I think if you look at the transfer portal players, and I know we'll get into some of that they've brought in, they are Matt Patricia style players. And I don't think that they go out and get all of these type of guys if there's a good chance that, hey, some other defensive coordinator is going to come in, or we're going to have to promote somebody who might have some different ideas. Clearly, they are building a defense in his image again for next season, which I think, just in addition to what I think both of you and I have heard, I think that's a very positive sign as well. So at this point, I would be surprised if Matt Patricia is not back. In fact, coming out of the bowl game, or the playoff game, excuse me, and we got to talk to Matt Patricia. You and I talked about it a little bit on what we learned live straight after the game. Everything he talked about in that locker room, both on and off the record, and we only got him for a few minutes, but he was pretty forthcoming, I thought, was about next year and looking forward and that kind of thing. And could that have changed? And an opportunity comes in where he decides to leave, or maybe that's just what he says in the immediate aftermath of the game. Yes. But I thought even then it sounded very much like Matt Patricia was thinking 2026 with the Buckeyes. So that's been my perspective, and nothing I've heard thus far. And I know in talking to you, it sounds the same, that he's going to be anywhere but Ohio State. I do think you want to get through this cycle, though, of NFL hirings and firings, just to be sure that some awesome situation doesn't come where he feels like, man, that's too good to turn down, and the opportunity to be back in the NFL and my family and all that works out really well. But I think he'll be back at Ohio State, long story short.
Offensive coordinator. I asked my source, what can I say, publicly about it? He said, you can say that we are looking hard outside the program at both the NFL and college. So in the NFL and college. So that's interesting. It's pretty a broad stroke there, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't promote from within. But the way it was told to me was they're looking, quote, hard outside the program at both the NFL ranks and the college ranks.
This reminds me a lot of the defensive coordinator search a year ago, where Ryan Day ends up with Matt Patricia, but that wasn't the first guy that they talked to. That wasn't the guy or guys that I think that Ryan Day was even zoned in on when, obviously he has names in mind when he kind of embarks on this, but he takes an open mind to it, takes suggestions, looks internally, as you mentioned. I think this is similar, where you have a situation, it's an attractive position. There are going to be people that from outside the program, both from the collegiate and NFL level, that are interested in this job. And there's also the look internally. And hey, like last year, would it make sense to promote Tim Walton and Matt Guerreri and have them sort of run this defense that Jim Knowles built now that they both have experience in it in order to kind of sustain what we have? Or does it make more sense to go outside? And I think that they have done that this year with the offensive side of the ball. Is a guy like Keenan Bailey ready to get in there and call plays? What would that look like, type of thing? You and I both think that an external hire, someone with a lot of experience, would be good, especially coming off of a year where you didn't do that, right? And the offense was good, but not great. And obviously a reason why the Buckeyes didn't advance or win any postseason game, including the Big Ten championship game. So, there's something to Ryan Day responding. I think Buckeye fans sometimes get frustrated that he doesn't sort of see some of this coming ahead of time. I think it's easy on the outside looking in to look back at things and say, why didn't he hire a replacement for Chip Kelly instead of promoting Brian Hartline? There's a lot that goes into it. But I think that seeing how the offense went this past year, seeing even when Ryan Day gets back more involved and takes back play calling, not having that veteran, experienced play caller guy who has some other ideas in the room, I think made a difference. And, Tyler Bowen offered that a little bit because he has been an offensive coordinator. But I think getting somebody who has been a consistent play caller and probably somebody who's done it at a very high level, be it the top of college football, the NFL, maybe even both, would be ideal for Ohio State. And that really lets Ryan Day then be the CEO. That we really only saw that for 1 year where he could fully be the CEO of the team. He had Jim Knowles on one side that he trusted to run the defense. He had Chip Kelly on the other side where he trusted to run the offense. And last year, Brian Hartline was running the offense, but you obviously know Ryan Day was very involved in that because Brian Hartline was doing it for the first time. So I think if you can get back to that worked so well in 2024, obviously that's not the only reason they won the national championship, but it certainly played a factor. And I think Ryan Day sees that. I think if you can get through this Matt Patricia stuff, make sure he's back, then you take care of the offensive side of the ball with the coordinator. Now things are looking pretty good, especially as you have supplemented or added in the transfer portal.
We'll get to the transfer portal. Actually, we'll get to it right now. So I did ask my source, like, what would you say to fans that are frustrated? Like, what can I say, like, publicly? And I was told, tell them, do the math. Quote, do the math. And there's only so much money to go around, and every position is its own animal. And he didn't mention wide receiver, but like that's the prime example to me. Like, would they have loved to kept Quincy Porter? Yes. By the way, Notre Dame getting Ohio State's it's a good place to get Ohio. If you're going to go somewhere and get guys that maybe might be wide receiver 3, 4, 5, going to Ohio State's a good place because those guys are hard to find. They're getting both Quincy Porter and they're getting Mylan Graham. Do I have that right? Or is that not official yet? Yeah.
Yes, that is done. And right, from my understanding, just while we're on it, those guys aren't coming cheap. And I think right. Ohio State had both guys in the program, and this is not a shot at either guy. I think they could both be really good for Notre Dame, but both guys in the program, and they had their numbers for each guys in mind, from my understanding, just like they do with every player. And Quincy Porter, that conversation was fairly quick. I think obviously he went in the portal. There wasn't much buzz that he was going to come back. Mylan Graham, they made an effort to go after, again, as our Garrett Hodge reported on the front row. They went after him again and tried to bring Mylan Graham back. I think they wanted new wide receiver coach Cortez Hankton to kind of have a chance to evaluate things a little bit. And I think Mylan Graham was a guy they definitely wanted back, but it was just a numbers game, as you put it. And there's obviously more than just the money involved, but the opportunity at Notre Dame is probably a little easier to get on the field. There's still the Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Innes factor, and obviously you have a guy like Chris Henry Jr. coming in. You've seen them already be active in the transfer portal with a wide receiver for the first time, by the way. That's a new thing. Brian Hartline did not do that, so that's changing. So I think, you would have definitely liked to have Mylan Graham back. I think despite what we saw this season when he got on the field towards the end of the year, there is a good player there. But like you said, the numbers have to make sense. And despite what people may think, there is not just this unlimited amount of money, even for the schools that seem to have it with the giant financial backers like in Oregon or in Indiana.
Look at it like the NFL. I mean, there's no salary cap, but there kind of is. There's only so much money to go around. So you look at it, they're almost doing a Cincinnati Bengals already with the wide receiver position because they're paying Jay. I know exactly what JJ is getting. Your hints out there are Ted Ginn, Chris Gamble, so on and so forth. Dwayne Haskins, CJ Stroud. Those are your hints. Those are your hints of what JJ is making. And he was making a lot last year, and he had to get a raise. And he's actually taking less than what he was offered by other schools, including Miami. He's taking $1 million less than what he could have got, and he's making a ton. And Chris Henry Jr. is making a lot. So you can't then pay Quincy Porter $1.5 million on top of that. I mean, you could. That'd be like the Bengals then going out and signing a third wide receiver and giving him the moon. Like, there's only so much to go around. You pay Jamar Chase, you pay T. Higgins, you can't pay a third stud wide receiver. Although the Bengals did for some reason, paid Mike Gesicki a lot. As I go,
you could argue the Bengals shouldn't have paid 2 wide receivers and maybe boosted that offensive line of the defense.
Yeah, I would have signed. I mean, in retrospect, I don't even know if this is retrospect. I think I said this at the time. I would have when they tagged T. Higgins, I would have traded T. Higgins and kept Jamar Chase. I think Jamar Chase is the best wide receiver in football, right up where they're with Jackson Smith and Jigba, Puka Nacua. I went on a really good run in sports gambling there at the end of 2025, like basically October to December, and I've just been getting my butt kicked lately. But one guy that I always can count on is Puka Nacua getting the over on his receiving yards, especially in the playoffs. It's just easy money. But yeah, I would have paid Jamar Chase, but not paid T. Higgins and beefed up the O-line and the D-line. That's what I was told. So you look at wide receiver, it's like, well, yeah, I'd like to keep Quincy Porter, but we had to keep JJ. We paying Chris Henry Jr. You know, they're keeping Brandon in. It's not that Brandon's making that much, but, you know, he's a captain. He'll be a senior. He'll be a starter for sure. So Quincy might have been W.
He's not playing for free, Dave.
He's not. No, he's not hurting. He's not hurting for sure. But like Quincy might have been WR4 because like Brandon's definitely going to be a starter. So is JJ, obviously. So then it comes down to Chris Henry Jr. or Quincy, you know, and both 5-star recruits, but Chris Henry Jr. #1 wide receiver in the country. So, and I was told like, okay, also, if you want to beef up the defensive line, which they're doing, and they're getting guys in the portal that are good, that don't come cheap, you can't spend a ton of money on wide receiver and this and that. So every position is different. They're not alarmed by it. Ohio State in the building, they're not alarmed by it. They feel good about the roster they're going to take into 2026, and they're still going to add to it. They want to get one more running back. They want to get a kicker. They're looking at corner.
They need a kicker. There's literally 0 on the roster. Literally 0 kickers.
I know you don't like this because I'm being facetious. They need to go out to soccer practice and be like, all right, you, how much are you getting in NIL? He's like, I'm not like $5,000. Come on, we'll give you $500,000 to be our kicker. I know it's not that simple just to go get somebody from the soccer team, but
also the soccer team this year, 2 years ago, really good. Last year, not so good. The women's team was good last year. Maybe one of the women's kicker wants to kick.
My good buddy Zach Brown, his daughter just enrolled at Ohio State. She should
still
be finishing up her senior year at Beaver Creek High School. Shout out to Reese Brown. She's on a full ride scholarship on Ohio State's women's soccer team. He's my best. I've known him since first grade. He's a huge Ohio State fan. It's surreal that his daughter is on a full ride scholarship to Ohio State. So she'll be a freshman. He'll be a freshman. She'll be a freshman. What's that?
When we start breaking women's soccer news on Bucknuts, everyone's gonna know exactly where that's coming from now.
At this point, I think Reese Brown could do a better job than the recent kickers we've seen at Ohio State. Like, she can definitely make chip shot field goals. Okay, all right, we'll move on. So I mean, pretty good gets. I mean, and nothing earth shattering, but the Buckeyes have now like quietly, because everybody's focusing on departures. And certain guys go in the portal, and everybody's like, I didn't even heard of this guy. I forgot he's on the team. Like guys like Josh Mickens and Trajan Odom and some of these guys. But like they've got 11 guys in the portal. They've got 11 guys that have come in. They all seem to be good fits. Your thoughts so far, especially the guys that have recently committed to Ohio State from the portal. Your thoughts, Patrick?
Yeah, you mentioned the defensive line. I think that's a good place to start. You know, they went out. I think one of the first guys they got was John Walker, the defensive lineman, obviously a guy that they recruited out of high school pretty heavily. I think they were, considered the runner-up for him. So you knew that was a priority right away. And then you go get the 2 Alabama guys and Kua Rusaw and James Smith, who, just looking at, I haven't done deep dives on either of them. But I think, anytime you can get guys from Alabama, that's been a pretty good track record for Ohio State. Sort of that pipeline from that I won't call it a JV program, but it's certainly not at the level it was under Nick Saban. But they're still landing tight top recruits, and Ohio State has no problem going and get some of those guys when they don't want to be in Tuscaloosa anymore. And you talked about having to pay to get defensive linemen. If you're coming from Alabama, I think you're probably asking. Not all defensive linemen know their importance. I think those guys coming out of the portal aren't cheap, but especially guys coming from the SEC. This is a blanket statement that's probably not fair for everyone, but I think you can assume if you're going to get a guy like from a program like Alabama, you're probably going to have to pay more so than you would maybe a John Walker is my assumption there. So I like what they've done. I think 2 interior guys. Obviously, we were looking to see if Caden McDonald would return. I think that were some serious discussions there. But once it was clear that he was leaning NFL, then I think you had to address that because, we were talking about the interior of the defensive line being, a question coming into the year with Caden McDonald. Now you have no Caden McDonald. Edward Houston did not have the breakout season you hope. You hope that's coming next year. I thought Will Smith Jr. was good, but, how big of a leap is he going to take? So I think the biggest thing, and you can look at it with the safeties too, right? Is Ohio State doesn't seem concerned anymore about going into the portal and recruiting over young guys, right? And I think safety is another good example of that, where you could have told Bryce West, who could play the nickel, or Fahim Delane or Leroy Roker, like, all right, next man up. That would have been the case in the past, right? To replace a guy like Lorenzo Styles Jr. and Caleb Downs. Instead, they have said, look, we're going to go find talented, experienced guys. And I think experience is the key there because look at the teams that made it to the semifinals and the national championship. They are older veteran teams. Go back a year ago, same thing. You want to be old and stay old. It's like what we talked about with college basketball for a long time. So going and getting 2 guys that can come into the secondary who have played a lot of college football and done so at a pretty high level. Terry Moore maybe is a guy that Buckeye fans haven't paid attention to. I had to look up a decent amount on him. That 2024 season was as good as Caleb Downs, if not better. The PFF grades have him better. I think statistics are similar. They are different players. They're not exactly the same, but I think they can do some of the same things that at the back end of that defense. And then you've got, sorry, I'm blanking on name, Earl Little Jr., who, when he first committed, I was like, oh, okay, that's a guy with what he just did at Florida State, finishing as their defensive MVP, can come in and play that Caleb Downs role. No, you went and got somebody else to do the Caleb Downs role. This is going to be most likely your starting nickel. But you look at that secondary, it's really versatile. Little can play the nickel. He can drop back and play deep safety, which is what he did most of the time at Florida State. Moore can do the same. Then you've got Jermaine Matthews, who we're assuming is going to come back at this point. No announcement yet. He's a guy we know can play pretty much any of the corner positions. I think Jalen McClain has some versatility in him that we haven't fully seen yet, but at times he was dropping down closer to the line of scrimmage or had to be in coverage. Like, I think this secondary is going to be really interchangeable next year and sort of be able to morph into whatever it needs to do on any given play. Similar to what we saw this past year, similar to what we've seen from Ohio State in the past. So I think Ohio State is looking at it. Look, we've got to be the best team we can each year. How do we do that? We've got to be more active in the transfer portal. And the other thing, and I had somebody ask me the other day, and I've seen this question quite a bit about, well, they've only got 11 guys, right? And they lost what are we up to? 33 if you count all the players.
I'm up to 29 scholarship guys.
Yeah.
I have my little notebook. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you also are bringing in the biggest freshman class you ever have. Now, was that the right decision to go get 28 guys? I think at the time, Ohio State thought it was because they knew there'd only be one transfer portal window. They thought they'd be playing till at least the semifinals. And it was like, we don't know if we're going to be able to be as active in the transfer portal as maybe some other teams. So let's make sure we have the bodies with the foresight that these guys are, they knew a bunch of guys were going to leave. To your point earlier, like this wasn't a surprise to them. But because they have this time, now you can go out and find some of these guys that maybe you wouldn't have been able to address before. But you still have to have room and so, not that all the true freshmen coming in are making a ton of money, but you have to be able to accommodate a 28-man class. So yes, you're losing a good amount of scholarship players, but you're also bringing in a big freshman class, which, I think if Ohio State could go back and change it, knowing what they know now, maybe they have a smaller freshman class and hit the portal in different positions a little harder. But, they're still being active, right? I think you're already at, 11 in the transfer portal that you brought in. So you are, and the end of the transfer portal window in 2 days, was it Friday? That only means guys can't enter anymore. Ohio State can still pull guys out of the transfer portal, and the two teams playing the national championship will have a couple days where their players, I think it's 5 days after the national championship game, where their players will be able to enter the transfer portal. What do you want out of those two? Are there players on those rosters? I haven't looked too deep into who might be leaving Indiana or Miami, but I think you're definitely going to kind of keep an eye on what happens then as well.
All right, we've had some people ask about this. You mentioned we think Jermaine Matthews is coming back. That's what I've heard too. Again, it's like not a done deal. We might find out today. Jermaine Matthews and Kenyatta Jackson. I'm also hearing he'll probably stay. Get into those two guys. And is there anybody else you're kind of keeping an eye on? Like, I don't think Austin Saraveld's going to go. He could, but I don't think he will. Luke Montgomery already said he's coming back. I think they're going to keep the offensive lineman. Carson Hinsman's another one that I was thinking might leave. I think he's going to stay. So Kenyatta, Jermaine, anybody else? And just what are you hearing about Kenyatta and Jermaine?
Yeah, I think, you're just reading the tea leaves here. I think especially after you lose Caden McDonald, like that the resources and the time go to Kenyatta Jackson and trying to convince him, which I think, he was probably thinking that way anyway. I think there were, you got to give it consideration to look at the NFL, but I don't know what the NFL would view him as, really a 1 year sample size that was good, but not great. And this is an opportunity to come back and have a year like Caden Curry did. Obviously we'd heard early on he was, and you could see it, like he wasn't really rushing the passer, especially with some of the early quarterbacks. He was kind of the guy hoping to keep him pinned in there with Arbel Reese spying. So I think this will give him more of an opportunity to get after the quarterback, hopefully not get held as much as he was this past season, assuming he does come back. So I feel good about that one. Jermaine Matthews, like I think if you're going to announce, I haven't heard anything specific about that, but I think if you were going to announce that, you probably would already. And again, I think if you look at how they're building out this secondary, I think it makes sense to sort of pencil Jermaine Matthews in there from the outside at least, because they haven't gone and gotten another corner. Now they did try, but I think you've seen the way that they've moved with the safeties that, okay, you have to assume that Jermaine is going to be a part of this. It would be weird if he's not. Obviously, that's a decision he has to make. And with the offensive lineman, I agree. I think Carson Hinsman's the one, and maybe this is just the Luke Whippler effect from a few years back. He has played quite a bit of football, more than most of the other guys. He's now started 2 full seasons and sort of a half of another season. So I don't think the amount of snaps or anything will be held against him. But I also think that, at a position like offensive line, at a position like center, the more development you can get, the better as you head to the NFL, as we've seen. And it's not like he has to, play for free like guys were at a few years ago where, okay, I'm going to be developed another year, but I could also go and be a 3rd round guy, 2nd round guy, whatever, and make some money. Now he's going to make plenty of money here. So I would be surprised if you don't get, everybody but Tegra, who obviously is already transferred to Kentucky, back. But crazier things have happened.
Last thing. So if you're a player and you don't enter your name in the portal by Friday, people are like, okay, you're stuck. You didn't enter your name in the portal. Let's say a couple months goes by, spring ball happens, and you're a player and you want to transfer. I think we're going to see multiple Xavier Lucas situations this year where guys just bypass the portal and just enroll to school and they're eligible right away. I've talked about him a lot. For those who don't know, Xavier Lucas is a starting DB for Miami, the Miami Hurricanes. He'll be starting in the national championship game. Started against Ohio State, had 4 tackles in that game. He was at Wisconsin, signed an NIL deal with the Badgers to come back for another year, and then decided he wanted to transfer to Miami. Wisconsin was not going to release him from it, and he just said, okay, deuces, I'm just going to go enroll at Miami. He was eligible immediately. Now, Wisconsin has sued Miami for tampering, but good luck proving that unless there's a paper trail. So my point is, Patrick, I think there's going to be some players that want to transfer, and their agents or third uncles or whoever are going to tell them, just do what Xavier Lucas did.
Yeah, look, if you don't need the transfer portal and say you get into spring ball and all of a sudden you're not feeling great about your situation, or something changes where a guy passes you on the depth chart, assuming they don't change some things so this can't happen, and I'm not sure how you would, it's definitely a possibility. And we're not just talking Ohio State, right? Like, this could happen anywhere. It is odd, Dave, that we haven't seen more of this because it has worked out so well. You and I talked about this mid-season, and it's not like this is a guy who did it and then just quietly kind of went to Miami and hasn't done anything. He's been very good for Miami. And, as you mentioned, Miami's in the national championship game. So he's playing on the highest stage. So I'm not sure why you haven't seen that. And maybe this will be the offseason where more players look at that situation and say, hey, I don't like what I've got here. There's not another portal window, but I'm going to take this upon myself to go and make a difference elsewhere. One more thing I wanted to bring up just real quick. I wrote about it yesterday. The redshirt rule looks like it's going to change. So players can go play 9 games now instead of just 4 and still redshirt. Also, I didn't know until I was reading about it yesterday, there is no redshirt rule in the NCAA handbook. That's just a term that we've kind of made up outside of the NCAA. But players will be able to play 9 games going forward, which I think
no redshirt rule. I'm sorry. What do you mean there's no redshirt rule in the actual rule book? Like
there is nothing in there that says anything. The words redshirt are not in the NCAA handbook at all. And really even, and I don't have it up because we weren't talking about this originally. I'd have to find the article that I was reading about it. But there's nothing really even that explains the concept of redshirting in there. It's sort of like vaguely discussed in the NCAA handbook, which it's just odd. But I'll send you the article I read. But I think this is beneficial for Ohio State specifically, so that you can potentially avoid a CJ Hicks, Malik Hartford type situation. If those guys are going to transfer, they're going to transfer, but at least you could get 9 games out of them instead of just 4, right? So, I think it probably would have benefited Ohio State to at least CJ Hicks. Like, that was a guy who was in the rotation at on defensive line, at defensive end throughout the early part of the season. I think he could have, continued to develop and help the Buckeyes. Maybe you have to pick and choose where you want to play him a little bit, but at least he could have contributed a Big Ten play. I also think, and I saw a few people making comments about, young guys needing to play more. This opens that opportunity. Now, Ohio State has to do it, but it I think it changes the math on, how many of these freshmen do we want to put in games? I think you need to play freshmen early. The guys that you think deserve to play, obviously, you're not just going to play every freshman, but the ones that you don't want to lose in the transfer portal the next offseason, I think you need to get them on the field to make them feel like they're really a part of the team. And this opens that opportunity while still having the chance to redshirt them if needed down the road. So an interesting change I just wanted to bring up because I thought it kind of fit with the rest of what we're talking about.
Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for all of your knowledge this morning. I appreciate it. Patrick Murphy, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Dave.
And thanks to everybody out there for tuning in. We appreciate it very much. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Go Bucks.